Are you ready for inflation? Is inflation starting to eat your profits like locusts? That's what we're going to talk about today. Got a tip for you that's part of a long series that we've got on fighting inflation. The other things we've been talking about, the war for talent, cybersecurity, these all tie together. But welcome to Wolf's Watch. I'm Wolf, and as always, as a leader of the pack, I'm scouring the countryside looking for tips, insights, resources that'll help you scale your business up and survive the crazy economy that we have in 2021 that's largely been driven by the craziness that we had in 2020. So let's get on with the inflation issue. This is partly being driven by upward price pressure on labor, on wages, right? And we talked recently about how 1 in 3 of unemployment insurance, those on unemployment that had refused jobs said they did so because it wasn't enough money. And when you dig into the data, there were more that were kind of chewing around the edge of that issue, but 1 in 3 were direct. Like, going, nope, not enough money, not coming back to work. That's going to put pressure. That's going to continue to put pressure on wages to increase. It's not the only thing that's pushing inflation, though, is it? Inflation in June came in at 5.4%. So we've seen inflation more than triple since the 1.4% of January. This is a big issue. If you haven't felt it yet, look and see who's joining us. Ernest, how are you, my friend? Thanks for being part of the conversation. Glad you're here with us today. Always good to have you in the conversation. See, as you're watching this, I'm glad Ernest is saying hi and joining in, because you know what? This is 21st century television. It is live and it is interactive. This is a conversation that goes both ways. We couldn't do this 20 years ago. So, Ernest, good to see you here, my friend. So, coming back to this issue of what we're talking about with war for talent and people not wanting to come back to work, you hear mixed reports on that, but the research data shows that's the case. Now, it's not the only thing. We've seen triple inflation in this year. I'm catching back up to where I was before I said hey to my buddy Ernest. Look, if you haven't felt this, you're going to, and you should be concerned. You're probably old enough to remember the 1970s. Now, maybe you weren't running a business then, but in the 1970s, we had double-digit inflation for years. At the end of the 70s, we had it for 3 years. We had it for about 2 years in the middle of the 1970s. So that meant everything. So think about that. 12% inflation for 3 years means everything's 33% more expensive. Is that right? No, it's worse than that. 10%. Let me back up for a second. See, I get in trouble when I riff on numbers without having my calculator. 10% gives you 33% increase in prices across the board for 3 years. So we had that happen twice in the 1970s. Could that happen again? Yes. Should you be freaking out? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Let me share something here with you. The Economist magazine, I highly recommend that you give this a look, this article, and The Economist. They've got good information. In their article, they were talking about, is this something that you should panic about? No, it's not. They did point out they had a great, and I want to read this to you to make sure I don't get these numbers wrong. They had a great analogy. In January, someone living in Cleveland, and this is an example, could buy a Toyota Camry for about $18,000. This is according to Economist magazine. They could fill up 16-gallon gas tank for about $27. In June, that same car would cost them, I don't have my reading glasses on, so we're going to see if we can do this right, would cost them $21,800. Right? So that's almost $4,000 increase in 6 months. The gasoline would cost $35. About $35 and change. And that's someone in Cleveland. If they were in California, it would be more than that, because our gas prices have gone up even more. We've gone up. It would cost them closer to $45 to fill up that same gas tank. So that's just the inflation this year. Here's why you need to pay attention to this. If you're not, what effect does this have on your customers? How does that change their purchasing decision? How does it affect your team? What effect does that have? Because now their paycheck's not going as far. All right, we opened up talking about that pressure on wages, right? To increase wages. That affects everything. A key is if your margins are taking a dive because, let me drop this. Thank you, Economist magazine. If your profit margins are taking a dive because inflation is eating away at it, then your customers start spending less, stop buying from you less. What happens then? See, that's not the kind of situation that we want to get in, that you want to get in as an entrepreneur, correct? You need to start responding now so that it doesn't become a problem down the road, and you'll be one of the few that's standing strong when it hits the fan. And if it doesn't hit the fan, you've got a stronger company. So again, this is not about panicking. This is about making a smart move today, because in 6 months you could be in serious trouble. If your what's your priority with your customers on their purchasing, right? Are you an extra cup of coffee a day? Are you a new pair of shoes? Are you food to them? Right? People got to eat, so they're going to buy food. If it gets really bad, they might get a little bit hungry, but they're not going to stop buying. They may buy less, they're not going to stop buying. If it's new shoes, guess what? You may not be getting the order. May not be making the sale. If it is education, if it's training, so there's a lot of, I'm professional services. I do a lot of training, consulting. Guess what? That goes to the back burner. Less of that happens because the money needs to be preserved, spent elsewhere. Because got to focus on first, the front end, bringing the money in the door. Secondly, keeping it. So we're going to talk about keeping it right now. Okay. Again, a little bit of inflation for a short period of time isn't a good thing. It's not critical. So far, we've seen it triple in 6 months. What happens if that continues for the next 6 months? That's going to start unsettling people and causing problems. So checking my notes here. I'm looking off camera. I'm checking my notes, or looking. We've got going. Got a share from Ernest. Thank you. If people are suffering from inflation, perhaps they need to have more than, perhaps they need to have more one income. Multiple income streams are good. Are you doing that with your business? Hopefully there's a way to do that personally, for individuals. Side hustles have become very, very common over the last 10, 12 years. What about your business? Do you have other areas you can expand into? The case study that I used for my book that's coming out in August, one of the things they were able to, as they transformed the company, they were able to open up space so that they could bring in another revenue stream into their business, which helped their profit margins immensely, because it was a super, super high margin sale compared to what they did for their core business. Do you have, and it was aligned with their core business. Do you have an opportunity to do stuff like this? Here's a bonus tip. This wasn't on my notes for today, and I want to keep this brief, so I know you're busy. I've got to get back to writing some stuff up, and I'm watching for more notes. So here's the thing. It's about increasing your margins. Now, before you start with the Captain Obvious jokes, okay, think about this. What are you doing with your team to start increasing margins? And there's a lot packed into that. There's a lot packed into that. We're going to have one tip on that. And this is going to be a long series, not a long series, but there's going to have multiple. Going to be brief today. There's going to be multiple Wolf's Watches as part of this series on inflation that deal with increasing margins and tactics for doing that. Here's one for today. For one thing, what is your average days aging for accounts receivable? This is a quick sidebar. I have to ask that. What is your AR aging? You got to know what that median is. The median being that number of days where half of them come in faster, half of them come in slower. And what's the spread of that? If you're getting them in 15 days, but the variation is coming in as fast as 5, but taking as long as 180, it's not the same as getting in 15 days and having a plus or minus 2. Right? You see margin of errors in polling. There's margins of errors in your KPIs and your key performance indicators. AR should be one of those. Being able to pull that in helps accelerate money. Now, how that ties in with inflation, bear with me. You need to be able to keep more of the money when it comes in, but you got to get it in the door first. Just making the sale isn't enough. You're living on credit then. You have to eat capital, or you have to eat debt in order to survive until that money comes in. So you need to move that AR number closer to 0, right? Ideal would be 0. Not necessarily always going to happen. Sometimes you want to strategically allow some strategic partners, some customers that are strategic partners, to have some more leeway. See, but that's a different decision. That is purposeful. Did that with a client that had some egregious, I mean, it was beyond 90 days. These were strategically important, clients that they had done business with for decades. And it was a purposeful decision. It didn't just happen, but because they weren't paying attention, or it didn't just happen because that's how things worked out. They met with the clients, they talked with those clients about that, and money was turning over. It was still coming in. It's just, the stuff that should have been paid 90 days ago, for example, was getting paid today, and they still had some, and they had new orders that were outstanding. So they were good for the money. They just took a long pay, and it made sense because of a lot of other considerations. And we don't have time to go into what all of that would be, but bring that AR in, because you got to get the cash in hand in order to have an actual profit. It's so important. And please, no Captain Obvious jokes about that, unless you can tell me off the top of your head like that, what's your AR? Then when I say AR, that means what's the average, the median, not average. This is a numbers thing. Average will not give you an accurate picture. Median, the point where half come in faster, half come in slower. What's your median days aging for accounts receivable? Okay. Now, moving to the next step, they have a quick tip, and then we're going to bear with me, and then we're going to move on. So the tip here is begin by looking at where you ship to your customer. Where are activities taking place that are not directly related to getting what the customer wants in their hands? So this is about eliminating waste. And there's a lot of different types of waste that happen. If you have ever worked with a Six Sigma professional or a lean enterprise professional, they should have at some point talked about, the classic 7 types of waste. But the key is in the perspective. It's a mindset issue of having that mindset, looking at, is this task that this person's performing in order to get this out the door to the customer really part of creating what the customer's paying for, what the customer wants on their end? Or is it necessary in order to make that happen? Or is it something that we really don't need to do, that you don't need to do in order to get the value that the customer is buying from you in their hands? You start with that evaluation so you can begin to look at where can you begin to drop tasks. You will be stunned. You want to develop a metric and you begin on the customer side. Why do you do that? One of the key reasons, which you've likely already guessed, is that's where you have the biggest impact on your customer. The second reason is you want to align operations with what the customer wants. How out of alignment are operations with creating and delivering that value? And you'll find a lot of opportunities there. It's not unusual to find ratios of 100 to 1, 1,000 to 1 in terms of the amount of time that it takes from when you begin preparing an order for a customer and when it gets in the customer's hands. When you look at the ratio of time versus actual value added. Now, coming back to my book that's coming out in August, in that case study, that particular organization, they had an hour and a half of actual value creation in their process, but it took 27 days to get it to the customer, to get it through their building into the customer. Not uncommon. It was its manufacturing operation is baked into how traditionally manufacturing had run. It wasn't that they were poor performing. It wasn't that they were doing bad. They just needed a different mindset, right? We talk about, let me see if I get this framed right for you. We talk about paradigms, right? They needed to shift their paradigm to see how they could do things radically different and get a radically different result. So margins, first thing, starting with the customer, looking at how long does it take? What are they doing? Is it really value adding? And begin to take that cost out, because you've got to get your margins up now. That'll give you a lot of options. Got to get the AR down and more consistent. If it's not, if there's anything over whatever your target should be, it can benchmark yourself to your industry, of course. Different industries are different things. E-commerce, web shopping, they have completely different numbers, almost instantaneous. So there's a different set of issues. If you have a brick and mortar business, you know what I'm talking about. If you're in manufacturing, you know exactly what I'm talking about, or should. If you don't, please reach out. So that's the tip for today. We've got more coming. This is going to be a longer conversation on all these topics because this ties into the war for talent that we've had 3 episodes on now. And specifically because wages, the price, labor's pricing up, and that's putting upward pressure on everything. Everything gets more expensive when that happens. General inflation is way higher than it's expected to be. We'll find out at the end of this week. We'll find out on July 31st what the preliminary is for how July was looking, and prepare for that. Plus, if you do it right, you're just simply doing what you want to do to have a stronger company so you can scale it up, right? We'll be talking some more about that. So thank you for joining this Wolf's Watch. Ernest Odell, thank you so much for being part of the conversation, my friend. Final thought, manufacturing was impacted the past year by COVID, of course, absolutely. Huge impact on supply chain, which we'll be talking some about. And you have do you have your risks assessed properly in your supply chain? Many industries, many businesses are still getting surprises on disruptions in their supply chain they hadn't expected. So, so that happened last year. So we need to be patient, and it comes back. Yes, patience are required. Risk analysis is required as well, and we will talk more. That is great. I'm so glad, Ernest. Thank you so much, because you set the stage for what we've got coming up in upcoming episodes in the next couple of days, where we dig a little bit more into supply issues, supply chain, and things you need to be doing right now. So, Ernest, thanks for being part of the conversation. Thank you for being part of this conversation, and hit the like button, subscribe if you're watching this on YouTube. Send your comments. Make comments if you're watching this on replay. We watch the comments. I watch the comments and respond to them. I want your questions, I want your thoughts, so that we can share that with the other people that are participating in this conversation as well. Thanks for being a part of Wolf's Watch. I'm Wolf, and I look forward to seeing you on the trail.